Hello, Mark.
How are you, Sonia?
I'm great. Don't you want some tea?
Tea would be fantastic. Yes,
Let's do
please.
tea. Because I know this is looking quite serious, this story here.
I suppose it depends on your viewpoint.
Okay, well, I think we should start with tea regardless because it'll just make it feel better.
Yes,
Tea
tea always makes it feel better. Spot of tea.
And I've even got a third cup of tea here, if you can just grab that mug for me, because we've got our busy cameraman there behind the scenes. That being the son Jamie, or James. He's busy filming this for us.
Yes.
And I know how much he enjoys his tea. So here's tea for James.
Intricacies of tea pouring. Yep. So I'm glad I was actually able to catch up with you and come speak with you, because I've got some questions which are seeming to be more and more pertinent to parents who are out there regarding home education. And while there are various things that they ask about, the main one that seems to come up over and over again and is a worry for so many of them is how would they transition their child from a home education scenario to a tertiary education scenario, because there might be paperwork required or certain grades in terms of marks. How does Oikos accommodate for that?
You're quite right, Mark. It is a question that keeps coming up. So am I to presume that you've been the voice of the parents at the moment? Is that what you're doing here? You're thinking of what the parents' concerns are, or you've heard them, and now you're asking me questions that you have heard as quite a concern for them. So
Yes.
You're speaking on behalf of them.
Exactly. I've, throughout the years, shall we say, always heard the argument one way or the other.
Okay.
So I thought, well, let's go to the horse's mouth and see what the actual answer is.
Well, I have done quite a few videos and series, and we've done a certificate course that's on the Oikos website that deals with this topic. Because as much as you might like me to answer it in a way that perhaps you want to hear, the answer I have is possibly, very likely, not what you want to hear. Because with Oikos, you asked specifically about Oikos. I'm not going to be able to answer this question regarding systems of the world or other home educating providers or homeschooling providers or curriculum providers, whatever, because they all have their own way of dealing with this matter. Some offer certification, some offer exams, some offer parent training. So I don't want to go into all the different answers that they could possibly give, because they're all going to be different.
Yes.
But I think if we consider parents' own experience as in what they are used to and what they're familiar with, that is what they maybe are referencing to when it comes to this question, in that they went to a regular school, they went through the process of the various grades and doing exams and getting report cards. And so maybe that's what's in their mind, and so that's what they now are thinking they need to do for their children, see to it that they get their grade levels and they get their report cards. And what I try my best to do is to help parents think of it differently and see it differently, even get a different perspective on it, because it's not that anymore in the home. Because if a parent has chosen to bring their child home from school, the school building, and what the school is offering, then it's not that anymore. It's something else. Greg, my husband, likes to always use the reference of cars. And he says it's the difference between going on a journey in a 4x4 versus going in a low-slung sports car on the highway and the direct route all the way there. They're two different journeys, and you're going to have two different experiences with them. So as much as I'd like to give an immediate, direct, straight-off answer regarding how does an Oikos student transition from exiting home education into tertiary, there isn't a straightforward answer, because the straightforward answer in the school system is here's Matric. Here's the exams, you can write the exams, you can get your Matric and carry on into adult life. Unfortunately, parents seem to think that the Matric certificate is the answer to them, to their student or their child being successful in getting into tertiary or in business or whatever. Okay. It's not actually the case. I mean, I know you and I were chatting just before we decided to actually share this with people and have Jamie film us chatting about it. And you even yourself mentioned that you have had a number of different employments, and people don't ask you for your Matric certificate and say, please show me your Matric certificate, because that's going to be the deciding factor as to whether you're going to actually be employed by that person who's interviewing you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that? Because I would like to answer this question more broadly than just give an answer to say, we don't offer certification, we've got a lot of reasons why we don't, but instead we offer something else. And the something else we offer, I believe, is in equipping parents to be able to go on a journey beyond this Matric concept, that everything's about Matric or their grade 12 certificate. There's more to it than that. That's from Oikos's perspective. That's how we see it. There's a lot more to it than that. And you indicated earlier that you agreed, that you saw there is more to it.
You're quite right, Sonia. As I had alluded to, I've gone through many different employments in the past, and out of all of them, if maybe 2 of them had asked they need to see my Matric certificate before they can legally sign off on everything, that's probably the sum of it. Very few of the places were strict about that. It's more a case of, do you have the skills to accomplish the work, rather than do you have a piece of paper. So yes, I have it scanned and it's on my computer just in case, but if you had to ask me where the physical copy is, I have no idea. I have a scanned copy. And it's just one of those things that if asked for, I can send it. But yes, I've very seldom been asked for my Matric certificate. And that's we're in 2018, so that's 17 years ago. So if 2 companies in 17 years have asked for a Matric certificate, then clearly it's probably not as important as we were led to believe.
Well, this has reminded me of something that somebody from the UK shared with me. He was telling us that there's a new model for employing people in the UK. Now, how broad this is in the actual statistics, I don't know. It would be an interesting study to do. But he was actually just saying that they don't actually employ people anymore. This company that he was with, and he had since heard that there were other companies adopting the same model, and that is they don't employ people according to their actual educational level, whether it's degrees or not, or matrics or not, or whatever. They do an actual character analysis on the person, and they do a character test, and they put the person, the group of people or person that they're wanting to employ through a series of tests that have got absolutely nothing to do with their certification of education up to that point. So I found that quite interesting. I thought, well, good on them, because they're looking at it a bit broader than just looking at what level of education this individual has got. But what's interesting is to come back to the concern that the parents have regarding this piece of paper, the certification. Oikos has so many students out there that are now adults, married people, families, running their own businesses, got degrees, that these students these adults now, only ever did Oikos home education. We like to call it a learning lifestyle, because it's really not a school system at home. As I said earlier, it's a lot broader than that. Yeah. So these students that were Oikos students, that are now married people or in their adult life, they have got degrees, and they are either running business or degrees without actually having a piece of paper, certificate of some kind that said that they had completed their Matric. In fact, what they had instead was a document, because parents feel like the document is important. And I'm not disregarding that. I actually respect the fact that parents are being responsible and concerned about wanting the best for their child. I think that's admirable, and I want to support that. And so because of that, we have means to support that. But before I get sidetracked on that, let me just tell you that, finish with the story of the students. They found other ways to get into tertiary education because what they had was an education that was beyond the level of education required to enter that tertiary institution. So their level of education needed to be grade 12 level, meaning they needed to have an understanding of mathematics to a certain level and language to a certain level. And they certainly had that because they had had this excellent education, one-on-one tuition, but their means of entry was just different to the majority of people coming in with possibly a Matric certificate.
So in other words, even though you don't get the piece of paper with the school stamp or the government stamp that says pass with exemption or whatever the case might be, even though they don't get that piece of paper, the child is equipped, perhaps even better equipped, to enter university than perhaps someone who has gone through a standard formal education at a public or private school.
Well, you touch a bit of a sensitive point there because I think that's in the eye of the beholder, what is better and what is not. But if we're going to take surveys and studies and reports on this, what you're saying is close, very much close to truth and a fact. Perhaps it is the full truth in the fact that people have done studies to see that the level of education of students coming out of grade 12 isn't necessarily of the same standard as a student who has had the tremendous opportunity of being privately tutored. And so that student that has been privately tutored is very well equipped. As you say, perhaps even better. As I said, as respond to that, that's sensitive because, you know, who are we to say which is better and which isn't? Because the student who's got their Matric might be very well equipped versus the one that was home educated might not be as well equipped. We can't presume that we can say one is better than the other. Okay. But the studies show that it is a standard fact that is so, that home educated students are excelling. And there's a lot of good reasons for it. In fact, Dr. J. Weil, who wrote the science curriculum, one of the science curriculums that Oikos provides, he speaks on this. We interviewed him when he was here in South Africa. And he speaks on this topic of how well equipped home educated students are in the tertiary institutions. And they don't struggle at all. In fact, they're confident. They're confident not just with academically where they are in their skill levels, but they're confident in themselves as people. Okay. It's one of the strengths of home educated students is confidence.
Just going back to what you were saying about recruitment processes in the UK got me thinking about an experience that I had a number of years ago, quite a number of years ago, where I had gone to a recruitment agency to get my name down on the system. And this was one of many that I'd been to. Some before they just make you do their typing tests, or can you put a formula in Excel, those sort of things. But this particular one, there was a group of us, probably 60, that were waiting, and they took us into a little hall, and they actually had us write a test. And there was math, there was English, so spelling, choosing the right word, context, those type of things. And afterwards, there were probably out of the 60 people there, and all of us had gone through Matric. That was one of the things that they'd asked. But
did they ask if you had a Matric certificate?
Yes, they asked if we had a Matric certificate. But out of the 60 people, there were easily 15 who failed that test. And so the people from the recruitment agency just turned around and said, okay, well, thank you for coming, but bye-bye. So I think just that alone highlights that you could have the piece of paper, but if you don't have the skill to back it up almost, it's kind of useless.
Well, that's the thing. But, you know, that piece of paper, we can't just chuck that out either and just say, well, a piece of paper isn't necessary, because we live in the world. And the documents are necessary. And that's why I think parents would like to be assured that it's actually okay. The piece of paper is just, we can't get away from it. Sometimes it's a requirement. What I'm trying to stress upon parents and help them to get to a different way of thinking on it is to say it's not about the piece of paper, as in, yes, it might be necessary, and we've dealt with that, and I'll tell you how just now. But what they need to be more focused on is preparing their students for adult life. on every level, not just becoming so focused on the grades and the academics that they forget about the rest. However, it is a fact that they're going to finish home education and arrive at the tertiary institution. They're going to say, well, where were you educated? And the student needs to be equipped in that as well. And that and how to deal with that. And that equipping could require some documentation. And so on Oikos website, we've got a PDF download that a parent prints out, and it states on that PDF download, on that piece of paper, that I'm the parent, I have seen to the education of this student. They were educated at home with the following resources or institution or curricular provider, whatever they want to put on there, that is the truth of what they are stating. And you were talking about that stamp for the piece of paper might not be a government letterhead, but it can be a government stamp, because the parent can take that piece of paper to a police station, their local police station, and say, please would you stamp this with an affidavit saying that I'm standing here, the parent, and I'm testifying to this being the truth of I have educated this person, being my child, up from this year to this year, using the following resources. So the parent is confident that they have equipped their child to enter tertiary or into adult life in whatever field they need to be going into. Now the student takes that piece of paper and goes to the university or wherever they want to go, even a job application. And that is their Matric certificate. It's a document that is a stamp on it, and it's official. And it really is official, because the parent is testifying to say, I have educated this child. And that there has sufficed, I must say, for many, many, many students. And on many levels, it's not just about entry to tertiary institutions. They also need it for visa applications. And this is where this paperwork is necessary. And we can't just chuck that out, because we know that it's necessary. We know that in life, you're having to submit documents to say, well, here's my bank balance, and you've got to be able to prove that on a piece of paper to be able to buy a house or whatever it might be, So we acknowledge that and accept that. It's just we don't take on the responsibility of supplying the parent with an official document to say your child is educated to this level and they can do tests with Oikos for us to see how they've fared with the test, so we can give you a certificate to say your child has done well or not well, or this is the grade level. We don't do that because we haven't walked the journey with the child. We don't know that individual like the parent does.
And I suppose that comes into the fact that no two children are alike.
Exactly.
So you could have an 18-year-old who far exceeds even a standard education elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Or you could have an 18-year-old who has had learning difficulties and on paper would be equivalent to only a grade 8, right, but they're 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of testing, they might not do well, and so the grade on the paper looks bad. Mm-hmm. But if you give them the physical task to do, they outshine the person who's got 90% on a piece of paper.
Right, correct. And so that very reason is why we don't at Oikos say, we'll test your child and we'll give you an educational certification of level of standard of education, because of that very thing that you've just pointed out, which has made me remember this one specific young man. He is coming to Oikos here in early 2018 to do a full assessment on the electrical runnings of all the equipment that we use for publishing books. Because there's things that don't seem right to us, that the lights dip when we use the guillotine and so on. And so we think there's something wrong, either we don't have enough power coming in. And so we have this young man coming to assess the situation. He was only ever Oikos educated. He did have his own learning difficulties and struggles through his journey of home education, which of course concerned his mom. His mom's really concerned about the fact that, what about all the real concern she has about the well-being of her son in adult life. Now, her son is now in his mid-20s. He's employing, I don't know how many people. The last I heard, it was over 5. Okay. And he is running his own company, and he is really doing well. He's a very practical person. And how about this? He married an accountant. So if he had struggles on that side of life, the academic side, because he's a real practical applying person, like the example you used earlier, I mean, how could we possibly test him and say he's ready for adult life when his result on his test paper wouldn't have shown that? Yet he was very, very ready, because from a young boy, he was being a very skilled entrepreneur. He was practicing his business skills from a little guy. That's what I witnessed. So, Mark, we could sit here till the sun sets, talking about example after example after example of people that have gone into adult life from being educated at home with only Oikos resources, which are not the norm. I accept that. They're not, here's your grade 1, 2, 3, and we'll give you your certificate and exit. And, it's not that. I understand that it's a different journey altogether. That's why we did this certificate course, just to hopefully try and help parents to see it from a different perspective. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they need their students to have Matric. And then the answer is very, very simple. We don't offer Matric. Sorry, but that's not what this is about. We're not saying you shouldn't have it and you don't need it. That's for a parent to decide. But Oikos's vision and mandate is the broader picture. And that is what we focus on. And that's why we did the certificate course. And I'm not watering down at all the concern the parents have about this, because I really understand where it comes from, and I respect that they are being conscientious parents, seem to questioning, having all these questions that they need answers to. But it's just that the Oikos answer isn't perhaps what they want to hear on this. But do you understand that?
I do, and it actually brings to my remembrance a number of years ago. Again, I was friends with a family whose daughters were at the time I didn't know it was Oikos material. I've only recently found out. And their one daughter decided, she wasn't pushed by her parents, but she wanted to go to university to study languages. She was fascinated by languages. And she had grown up with only Oikos. I can say that because in hindsight, I know. And so she'd grown up with Oikos, and really only for the last 3 months or so of what would be a Matric year, she did a certification process through Damlin, I think was the institution. And she got because the university that she had applied to said, no, we need this and that or whatever. So her parents assisted her in that, but that was her choice. And from what I know now is she has a degree in English and Greek, and she's actually a teacher. Fully qualified, all of that, but she had essentially 18 years of Oikos education.
Now you see that example. That example is that young lady couldn't just get her Matric the standard way that maybe all her peers and maybe the community she was in and friends and church members or whoever it was, cousins, friends, whatever. They might have all been talking about, when it gets to that age, Matric and getting their Matric certificate, and there's so much focus on what is your grade and studying a Matric in that big year. And there's a lot of focus on that, and the young people also under pressure on that, and they start being concerned about the fact that they're not doing this that everybody else is doing. They feel like they're kind of swimming upstream and not downstream with everybody. And that's basically what it is. It is actually swimming upstream. But she had to find a way. And she spoke with her parents about that, from what I'm gathering, and then they assisted her and found that Damlin in her situation was the one to go with. And I remember you telling me earlier that story, and you were saying that you assisted her because the only area that she needed a bit of assistance was with Afrikaans, because she was going to have to write the Afrikaans paper. And the other subjects she was ready for. And it took you 3 months, or you and her, or her specifically, 3 months to prepare to write the necessary examination to get what she needed to get into tertiary. Now, what I like about that story is it was bigger. There was more to that story. It was broader than going through the grade 12 year and getting a Matric certificate at the end, as I say, flowing with the stream. There was more to that, where there had to be investigations, research, exploring, seeing where she needed to brush up a bit on her skills as an Afrikaans is the subject that she needed to write that she wasn't ready for, so on and so forth. And she went on to get a degree. So her journey was different to those swimming downstream. Now, in the university experience, I'd love to speak to her because her journey would have been different there too. And the fact that the majority of people in university would have been in having come through the normal channels, but her channel was a different one. It required something different of her to get through those doors. And I would like to believe that it also required her to have faith and to be praying and to be applying herself and to be diligent and all these wonderful characteristics or attributes that needed to be strengthened. I mean, you walked with her. Did you experience that?
Yes, I mean, I sad to say that I've lost contact with the family, but from what I was exposed to, the faith and character and leaning on each other, depending on each other, was very strong.
Okay.
And whenever there was a problem, they could go to their siblings or to their parents and ask for help. And obviously, there are times where you need to deal with something yourself. It's that is how life goes. But the social interaction that I had experienced with them is that she had no problem going to university. I mean, she would strike up conversations with people, chat to them, get to know them. So definitely on a social side, even though she had been home educated, I do not think she struggled with that whatsoever. So, as you say, the education standards were fantastic. It was just a little bit of help with one subject, being Afrikaans. Socially, she fit right in. So, yes, the method in getting there was different.
Correct.
But the outcome was a number of years later, she had a degree. And I think that is the thing that the parents are really worried about is, can my child go to a tertiary institution, get their degree, and become a doctor, a lawyer, those type of things?
Because I have to just say yes, because we have doctors and lawyers that were only Oikos educated. In fact, their testimonies are even on the Oikos website. The immediate ones that come to mind, of course, is Sean and Leanne, because I love to reference to them because they're brother and sister, and they both got professional degrees, doctor and lawyer. And, that just, to me, that is what people need to know. They need to realize that you said something just now that I think really buttons this up, and that is the method is different. And so the method for Sean and Leanne to get their degrees, to get into university, was different to had they just been in school and got their matric and got a good matric exemption to get into university. That would have been one story. But their story is different. And it is one of faith and perseverance and needing to apply themselves in a different way. I'm not saying that matric students don't have to apply themselves in that way as well, because maybe they also are having to prepare for an exam that they're nervous about and they really got to work hard. So it's not to belittle that in any way. It's just that our journey with the students, Oikos students, we've just seen such fantastic results. I mean, we wouldn't be talking so confidently about it if we didn't. There's just story after story after story. I'll talk about the one young man that I was telling you about who's coming to check our electrics. He's now an electrician, and he's got other things, qualifications as well. I don't know what, he's a plumber as well. I think what he did is instead of doing regular standard education, he was doing N1 and N2 and N3 while everybody else was in school. He was busy going through his trade courses, I think that's what you call them. But you'll see I'm not all knowledgeable and brushed up on the names of everything and what are all the different kinds of qualifications or education courses you can go on or exit from tertiary, because they change. So I just can't keep up with them. 1 minute it's this acronym and then it's another one and another one and another one. But what excites me is the mandate and the vision God gave Oikos has not changed. He wants us to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness and be in right standing with him, and the things will be attended to. All the things shall be added unto you. That's our founding scripture from Matthew 6:33. And that has not changed. His word is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So that is what we are here for in Oikos, is to help families and parents to walk this journey of seeking first the kingdom and having faith and trusting and believing that the rest is going to be taken care of. But because we know it's important, and because we know that a student wants to travel, they need a visa, and the systems require a piece of paper. So we have a PDF document that says parent, print it out, and you fill it in. And you state on that what is fact, because we don't know what the fact is about your individual each individual child being so different. You were mentioning this family of the one daughter wanted to go to university, which makes me think the other daughters. And
There
did they
are.
go to university?
As far as I'm aware, they didn't. I could be mistaken. Like I say, I have lost touch with them, but I do know that another one of the daughters now runs a children's home, and so you really don't need to go to university to be charitable. I suppose that's what that comes down to, is just showing love, and the things that I can look back on in hindsight and see what she learned through Oikos, the character traits that it grows in a person. And so at the end of the day, for her, the piece of paper didn't matter. She's doing what, as you say, what God has put before her to do. And he doesn't care about the paper, he cares about the heart.
Well, you said it. That's exactly the message. What does he care about? That's what's going to need to matter to parents and to their hearts. I think this is a really good discussion at the beginning, at the start of a new year, for us to be talking about what matters to God. So if we come back to that, we've kind of gone off the
Just a little
topic
bit.
of the fact that, we acknowledge that parents are concerned. Maybe there's parents out there that are grappling with the decision of, do I home educate? And if I do, and I'm not going to be providing my children with a matric at the end, well, I would like to say to them, does it matter? Because matric might not be worth all what you think it is at the moment anyway by the time they're there. We've really got families that have got little children that are concerned about going on the Oikos lifestyle journey because we don't offer matric at the end. And so that is like a bit of a stumbling block to them. They're thinking, well, if they're not going to offer matric, then maybe I must go with the school at home approach. And we're discussing that here now. And what you've come back to is what matters to God. And that is where I think we should end the conversation, because
Fair enough.
Because that is what matters. That's what should matter to us. That's what we want to encourage parents to be thinking about, what matters to him. I'd also like to say that the fact is that what is it going to look like in a year from now, in 2 years from now, in 3 years from now? What parents knew education to be to them and their child is not what it is today. So they've got to think about that too, and realize they must follow the convictions of their heart. And if their heart is they're bringing their children home to educate them at home, well, then do that today. And don't base your decisions today on what you think might be something that's going to be required of you 10 years from now. Because you get the point, you're going to be missing out on today if you're focusing on 10 years from now. You might not have the fullness of today that God wants for you. I don't know what is your response?
Well, I think basically it just comes down to the fact that through the journey, towards the end of it, towards the end of the home education journey, shall we say, part of the journey. I don't think the journey ever really ends, because you can take what you learn, and it doesn't matter where you learn it, you can take knowledge that you learn and apply it through life. Is, as you say, the parent can print off that document, which is on your site, and go to the police station, and basically they're making a legal argument saying, I am standing surety for my son, for my daughter, saying that I have done the best that I could do for them. And essentially they're putting their own reputation on the line for their child, saying, we've done the best, this education is good, and we have complete confidence that they can go forward in life because of what we've done as parents. The other thing that I was thinking of is how for a period of time I was involved with a public school in Johannesburg, and I could see, sadly, the failings of the public school system and how it doesn't cater for every child. 40 children in a class, really, you're spending more time on discipline than on education. And it's really the ones who are there to learn are the ones who suffer, because your time as an educator is spent on those who are disrupting the class. And there's those who unfortunately, at the moment in the current system, just get pushed through. They cannot even write their name. I remember there was one boy in, I think it was a grade 6 class that I was teaching at the time. He couldn't even spell his name. And when I queried it, it was a case of, well, he has to be pushed through. And I'm thinking, so he's going to reach the age of, if he's allowed to get that far, he'll be 18 in grade 9, can't spell his name, and then is let out of the system. And what future does he have? Whereas I think from what you've told me, the home education system that Oikos offers is, even a child like that who would have difficulty in learning can find other ways to apply himself, rather than this is the framework that we expect you to fit into. And if you don't fit, well, now we'll just sideline you. And I think that's the key, is that Oikos accommodates anyone really where you're at. And as you get to that transitional period in the journey between home educating and tertiary educating, it might not be as fluid as people might hope it to be, and just wave the paper and just walk through the door.
Yeah.
No. But it's a case of, if it's something you're pursuing, then it can be done. You've alluded to many people who have gone through the journey and they've got their qualification. I mean, to become a doctor, that's at least 6 years of tertiary studies.
Well, in Leanne's case, it's been 9 so far, because there's all these things I never knew about, ComServe and internship and all kinds. Yeah.
So, I mean, a university is not going to let you study for 9 years if they don't have confidence in your grounding, in terms of what they require on paper, essentially. So I think, yes, that kind of really gets to the nitty-gritty of what we were concerned about, and what I came to you about is that transition. Can it be done? Does it happen?
Yes,
and
yes.
I could at least go back to people, or if I get asked again, and say, you know what, there is an answer. It might not be what you want to hear, and it might not be as pretty and flowery or however they expect it to be.
It's not flowing downstream.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's life. Not everything's going to be laid out for you. If you really want to pursue something, you need to fight for it at the end of the day.
The thing is, if students are experiencing their parents being determined and standing with them, and like you mentioned, that family, how they got strength from one another, if that's what they're having to do to get through the fact that they're going upstream and not swimming downstream with the flow, the easier route, it is tougher, it is hard, but that actually, it's like iron sharpening iron. It's strengthening those students, and even the parents, because the parents are going through their own journey of, I hope I'm doing the right thing, and I want to do what's best by my child, and I don't want them to have a struggle that was because I didn't do something in a certain way. Those are their real concerns, and good on them for having a heart and feeling towards what's best for their children. But again, we can come back to what's God's best for their child. And if God sees and the child sees that the parents are really having to walk in faith and trusting Him and seeking Him for answers for that individual, I mean, that in itself is tremendous equipping for that student. I know Leanne, actually, I keep referring to her, but she visited us recently, and it's rare. We get to see her once a year because of her in university and doing her internship in one province and her ComServe in another province. And if you sat and chatted to her, she would tell you it's not about her academic achievement or level intelligence, it's about her character. It's not about how well she has done in the test, because she says she can always study for that and gain the knowledge she needs and really work hard to be able to do well in that test. Where the test really comes is in her character, and how is she coping with the difficulties of being an intern and in the difficulties of facing situations that terrify her. What does she do with that? She doesn't go back to her grade 11 maths book and think, now, how did I achieve there? What was my grade? She doesn't. She goes back to what she caught from her family, what she was taught, her character building, the instilling of character development in her, character traits in her by her parents. So she will tell you herself that is what has helped her to keep her strong and her faith and having to run to God. And she'll talk about her spiritual journey as a doctor, more so than her knowledge journey. And when I try and talk to her about the knowledge part, about how have you managed and how have you coped with the academic side and the challenging, it just keeps coming back to her spiritual journey, because that is what carries her through. So it's just so interesting. That's why I keep coming back to the spiritual journey as being what matters to God, and wanting to really encourage parents to see that as important, to see that as what matters to Him is what must matter to us, and get onto that side and leave the worries behind of the things of the earth. I shared on another video about how God tells us, do not look at the things of the earth, but look above, and at the things above. And so if that's what we can encourage parents to do, even though they want to know about being assured that they are doing what is right and that they will be able to get certification of some kind, and we say, well, no, we're not going to give you certification. That doesn't help them. But we're saying, we can give you documentation, or not even we can give you can download it and do what you need to do with it. But this is what we encourage you to be focusing on. This is what we believe that God's mandate on us at Oikos is to encourage you in, and that is to focus on what matters to Him. And if they start doing that and make that shift, they might just find that the very thing they're worrying about is not actually a concern to God at all. They're spending a lot of time and energy and mental exhaustion on worrying about something that doesn't matter to Him. So it's like futile. It's a lot of energy that they're spending unnecessarily. So we want to help them not to waste their energy on things that are futile, even though it's important to them. I really don't want them to misread or misinterpret what I'm saying to say that it's not important. Don't worry about it, it's not important. You don't have to worry about Matric, it's not important. I understand that it is important to them. So, but is it important to God? That is the big question. That's what I would like them to sit and think about. And I'm really glad you came and asked about this, because it is a topic that we have addressed in numerous different ways, and it's just good to hear it coming from somebody like you are saying. At the beginning, I said you sound to me like you're speaking on behalf of the parents, being a voice for the parents. It's good to hear it from that perspective as well. For me, in Oikos, not just to be saying this is how it is and this is why it is, but rather to actually just hear, well, actually, we need to pay attention to this tremendous concern that parents have, and not just brush it off in a way that makes them feel as though we're saying it's not important. And I hope that is clear. Would you say?
Yeah, so I suppose I could sum it up by saying that, yes, it's important that a child is equipped and ready to enter tertiary education, and you're not denying that. But at the end of the day, the methodology is going to be different from the norm. And even if the child is not ready academically, at least character-wise and in their personal pursuit of God, they will have a foundation that they can stand on. They will have character traits that have been developed in them that will push them forward to keep striving for those things, and perhaps open their eyes to, the way the world wants me to do it and the way 10,000 other people are doing it is maybe not the way for me. And so I think, yes, that does answer the question. Is Oikos is not going to give you a stamp on a piece of paper and say, well done, off you go. But you're there every step of the way to help them achieve the goals that they ultimately set for themselves as a family, and say, this is the direction we're going to go in. And it might even be years after they are done with their education that they realize, where I am now is where I am because of Oikos, irrespective of having that piece of paper at the end of the day. Be it that they used that and went in an academic direction, or they went in a service direction, or both. So yes, that about sums it up. Thank you so much for giving of your time today and letting me throw the questions at you that are out there, and for giving your input on them.
Well, I'm really glad you did throw the questions at me, because they are very important questions and people would like to hear what the answer is on those questions. And I hope that we have been able to share with you today in such a way that it has been helpful. If more questions have come to you, or questions pertaining to this or anything else, you can just email us at help@oikosfamily.co.za, and we will do our best to attend to those questions with whatever answers we may have for you on them. And hopefully, Mark, if you hear some questions from the people, because you've heard these questions out there and you've come and asked me, so maybe if you hear more questions, we can have another day where we can have a cup of tea and you can ask me the questions that you are hearing from the parents, and we can share that with the people.
Most definitely.
Good, great.
Fantastic.
Well, thanks. And thanks for being with us.
Cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.